Due to this year's pandemic, things got shut down. Our lives have changed. How should we respond? What does the coronavirus teach us? Are there any other ways to expand? Today with Venus Rekow, founder and CEO of NeuroShifts, we will cover inclusive leadership in actions, including expand opportunities, how companies and individuals should respond, get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and many more. Let's get started with today's program. And please welcome our special guest, Venus Rekow. Welcome to today's Meaningful Conversations. My name is Sylvia Fime. I'm the president of NAWMBA Seattle. Today, my hosts are Lynette Garcia, my marketing director. Hi, Lynette. How are you?
Hi, how are you, Miss Sylvia?
Hello. Good to see you, Lynette.
It's a pleasure always.
Awesome. So my another co-host is Kendall Caudry. Hi, Kendall.
Hey, Sylvia. Hey, Lynette.
Hello, Kendall. Kendall is my professional development director. Good to see you both. And our special guest today is Venus Rekow. Hi, Venus. Are you online?
Hi, Sylvia. Yes. Hi, Lynette and Kendall. It's so great to be here.
Hi. It's
Hi,
awesome
Venus.
to have you, Venus.
Thank you. I
How
appreciate
have
it.
you been?
I'm doing great. Thank you. And I think that I would say if you have not cried this pandemic, you are officially not a human. So I think that I have, throughout the pandemic, my emotion had shifted back and forth, but I have been very blessed with a lot of new things that have come out as a result of the pandemic. So I am grateful today.
Thank you. Thank you, Venus. Could you please let our audience know a little bit more about yourself?
Yeah, so I am Venus Rekow, who leads NeuroShift, a consulting firm specializing in driving inclusion, diversity, and equitable organizations. We work with organizations in the Pacific Northwest and outside, Fortune 500 nonprofits, and our passion is really supporting the underrepresented groups and helping bring a voice so the leadership of the organizations can embrace who they are and support them. And so I hope that that gives you a little bit of my background. You might be hearing an accent also. I want to pull that out there. So I am from Colombia, and that's where my accent is coming from. And I'm a proud Latina who is really focused on serving. And so I hope that that gives a little bit of breadth and scope.
Yes, yes. Thank you for sharing. Well, we actually would like to know a little bit more about your, I understand you being in this field of teaching and coaching for how many years?
Yeah, so I launched the business 6 years ago, but I have been in organizational development in HR for over 10 years. That was my background. And I understand a lot about where HR comes from, where they're thinking about this work, and sometimes how we unintentionally become the obstacle within organizations when we try to drive and progress in diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so I combine my passion for science and my passion for supporting human development to do this work within organizations. So I look at the organization from two aspects. One of them is the individual, which is the behavior, how people show up, and then the systemic. What are the rules that this organization has created for the ways in which people need to show up? And what I mean by that is sometimes we have organizational rules or culture that lead people to show up in ways that might not be authentic to them. And they might lead to a lot of exclusion of unequitable transactions or relationships.
Yes. Thank you for sharing more details. So when you talk about I guess diversity inclusion. What's your definition for diversity and inclusion?
Yeah. When I think about diversity, I think about embracing our differences, whether those differences are race, ethnicity, it could be personality, it could be abilities. We might have different abilities. It can also mean sexual orientations. It can mean gender identity. So I try to look from a very broad aspect to be able to embrace and think about, when I think about everyone embracing diversity, I want to see that representation at the top of organizations, not just represented, but also holding power. And holding power by being able to influence decisions and make decisions.
And when you just said that we're holding power, it's coming to my mind like, what is sharing power? Because we just got these two definitions. I'm holding the power, or what kind of class of workers or society hold a power that the others have to just go with along of what the holding power person says.
Yeah.
So what it can be a great inclusive leader that can either hold the power, but at the same time give the chance to share the power to others, to be inclusive and feel like we can just say or put something in the plate.
So yeah, let me explain a little bit more. When we think about power, one of the things that I think about is how power emerges within relationships. And so I could be an executive who has the title of an executive, but I may have no power because I'm not given power by the individuals in my organization. And that's clear when leaders try to do things that don't go anywhere. It's a show that they have no power, that people haven't buy in into what they're trying to do. The other aspect of it is sometimes you do hold that power because you have the decision making and you make those decisions. And sometimes you have to make them without everybody's input. Now, what you're talking about, Lynette, is the ability to really bring in the voice of others to influence those decisions. And that is sharing power. And I believe we have to do both. You can't just do one, you have to do both. And when we do that, one of the ways we do this is through transparency, is by really being transparent with our employees, with individuals and organizations about what we're trying to accomplish, what we need to do, and how do we need to hear their voice. I think that if we hear their voice, we also have to be clear. I see this a lot in organizations where leaders are now saying, I'm very inclusive. I want to hear from you. Tell me what do you think, what I should do. But then they go and do what they thought they were going to do from the beginning. So they really didn't honor that voice. Yes. And
they're just asking for just to do a protocol, it would say.
Yeah, so it might look like performative. However, I think what happened with the glitch is sometimes we don't talk about what is in our mind, our expectations for the conversation. And some conversations that we have, even with our friends, some conversations are just more like sounding board. So I might come to this group and say, hey, I'm thinking about making this decision. I would like to hear from you to know whether or not I'm making the right decision. Then I'm clarifying and being transparent about why I want to hear your voice. And I'm clarifying that might not necessarily go with what you're thinking, but I'm allowing your voice because I think it's important for me to validate the decision I'm making. The issue is sometimes people don't say any of that. And then they go and say, tell us what you think. And everybody goes and spend all their energy. And then they feel exhausted because they went and told all these things to the leader and the leader didn't really apply any of it.
Which maybe can be frustrating for the whole team at the end when you're just getting those focus groups and the outcome of the result is not what you at the end, at least 1% was expecting to be implemented.
Mm-hmm. So I think it goes back to a lot of this is setting up the expectations and knowing when you need to share power. There are different ways that you can share your power. How? And so it's like how you're sharing that power matters. When are you sharing that power matters? So people understand that they are part of the process and it's not like things that happen to them, they are part of what's happening. And I think that's what everybody craves, but that's not what they necessarily get in organizations.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow. It's not what we want at the end of the goal, but maybe what we try to achieve at a certain point.
Can you clarify a little bit about that?
Because when we do what you were saying, like holding power, sharing power, just do like a focus group to put others into decisions or in the decision making, sometimes they don't get the whole goal, but at least they get 1% of it and feel
So they
inclusive.
get to participate, yes? So what we do need, so one of the things that I think is happening in the world is really all this transformation is a redistribution of power. And know that instead of like 1% having power in determining how we live our lives, we have everybody with their unique and differences influencing the decisions that affect us. And so we're trying to redistribute that power in a way that is a bit more equitable. Yes, and it is not just a few determining how we live. And I think that that's what we wrestle with. And I think sometimes people get this scarcity mentality that like, if I have power and you know, I can't give it up to you because then that means I'm losing something. No, you don't lose something. You actually leave a greater impact when you share your power with others, because you're gonna be able to create something bigger. And I see that, you know, in teams where leaders don't share their power, it's all about them. And they don't allow others to really influence the decisions and fully participate in the outcomes of the organization.
That's so true. Kendall, I believe you have a few questions for Venus.
Oh, sure. So Venus, I know, you know, being an inclusive leader is key to the success of an organization. So what are some of the leadership skills that people need to lead in these challenging times that we're in right now?
Yes, so I would say in terms of skills, there's two things. There are habits and there are skills. Mm-hmm. In terms of skills, I think it's about how do you communicate with people in your team. A lot of the communications that happen are very transactional, and they are communications in which you hold the power because maybe you tell them what to do. Anytime you're controlling outcomes and controlling how people go about doing their work, you're holding power. That is exhausting for very smart people coming into your organization, bringing ideas where none of their ideas get applied. So what you need to do is really acknowledge that you have to be humble, that you don't know. In this era, you don't know everything. You can't solve everything. And I see sometimes leaders being hooked on solving problems. They think that's the only job they have to do. But the reality is that sometimes you don't just have to solve the problems. You have to empower those you work with to solve the problems. So to share their power, you have to invite them through conversations, coming in and saying, hey, we need to figure this out. I don't know how to get it done. What do you think? What about you? How do we solve these? So that's a skill, and it's shifting from hard power to like, I tell you what to do, to soft power. I don't know, and I'm facilitating. It's like a facilitation skill of knowledge. That's in a skill level. In terms of actual habits, you know, the things that you have to do, and because I think about diversity, equity, and inclusion is not something that you necessarily always do. It's just the way you live your life. It's how you think about your everyday situations. So for instance, you might come into a situation like right now, yes, where I'm invited to participate in this event. I'm thinking, okay, who is at the table right now? How much power do they have? Do they have a voice? Can they participate? Yes. So I'm going to be looking for where are the men? Where are the women? Where are the Black women? Where are the Asian women? Where are the Latino women? Where are the individuals with disabilities? Yes. If we were to make this event more inclusive, then we would actually have ASL translators translating the event, for instance, for individuals who are deaf. So we think about those ways of how do we drive inclusion? I start looking at everything that I see through that lens. So it's one of the ways I start looking at that. Then the next step, it's for me to drive this, I had to think about how I seek different perspectives. So if I am having a meeting or I'm doing an event or anything, if I only connecting with, let's say, Lynette, then guess what? Latinas, we are Latinas, but we don't have necessarily, you know, like a complete different perspective. There is commonality in us. She does think differently, obviously, but I will also want to bring more individuals who don't necessarily are just Latinos to be able to come out with an outcome. So I have to think about how do I seek those perspectives. The other thing I need to do is I need to think about what power do I have in this situation if I have the decision making, and how I can use that power to support others. How can I share that? And so maybe it is by inviting others to participate and voice their ideas. That's how I can share the power. Maybe another way that I share power is that I ask them for feedback, that I say, hey, have you noticed anything that I'm doing that is not inclusive? I want to hear from you, because then I'm sharing power and giving them the power to tell me something that I wouldn't see, yes? The other thing that I would say that you have to do is you have to disrupt bias. If you see and you hear people joking, people saying things that is biased, that is discriminatory in some way to individuals from various groups, whether it's a woman or a Black person or an individual from the LGBTQ community or disability community, you have to call it out. If you're in a position of power, call it out and say, you know, that's interesting, you said that, but that sounds biased. You may have no intended to be biased, but it has an impact. And let me tell you what the impact is on this or in these individuals. So those are some of the things, and I'm trying to kind of pull it apart. So so far, you know, what, any other questions in terms of these type of behaviors that I think are very important for driving inclusion?
What, right now we're, go Sylvia.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that was Kendall's answer.
Oh yeah, go ahead, Kendall.
Oh, no, no, I was just looking at some of the additional questions that we had. So if you've got a question that follows up on something that Venus just said.
No, just go ahead with her.
Okay.
And Venus, I believe you also prepared some slides you would like to share with our audience today.
I could share, yeah, I could briefly share this slide where I share the different behaviors that, and let me see if it is showing. Here it is, where I talk about inclusive behaviors. And let me know if you're seeing it.
Oops.
Yeah,
Yep.
can you enlarge it maybe a little bit?
It's right now it's showing full screen.
Oh,
No.
okay.
Okay.
It's not giving me the view for switching because I know what it needs to happen. It needs to switch to
Can you do it
to
like
presenter view.
Yeah, presenter view. That's the one that you're looking for, yeah.
Yeah, but for some reason, let me see if it's here. Okay. No, it's not. It's not giving me the opportunity. Let me just pull this out.
Right there.
There.
You
Yep.
have it. Good job.
Great.
Okay, so let me see if you're seeing it.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
So some of the behaviors that we have to think about is recognition. This is something that we hear a lot from individuals. They don't feel recognized in their organizations, and that's big. And so being able to know as a manager what makes this individual feel that they're valued, that matters. So you want to ask those questions. Don't assume that because you had worked with an individual who is Black or Latina, you will know how to support every Latina. And so think about what does this individual need and ask that question, build the relationship to be able to understand what allows them to feel supported. The other thing that I think we have to do as a leader is we need to ensure that we're sponsoring individuals because women in particular are over-mentored under sponsored. And what allows us to really progress is being sponsored. We need both. We don't just need one. And so it's very important we think about that. How do we are mentoring in our sponsoring individuals? What type of opportunities are we providing to them in terms of projects? How much visibility do those projects have for these individuals? And the other thing that we have to do is, I think that transparency is really important in decision making. We're in the age of transparency. There is no anymore, I hide what I do and I hope they, you don't ever hear it. That is not reality. We really need to talk to people and let them know, even if the decisions that we make may not be always the best for them. They might not have the best impact. So here's some of the behaviors. I think it will be fun for those who are live to maybe share, what's one behavior that you think that you would practice. And if you want to share, let me see, it's not active. Oh, for some reason it's showing not active. So I have to get out of share for a second and see why it's not active. I was thinking it will be fun, but if you don't, like, share in the chat or in the room, in the Facebook room, to what behavior do you think it resonates with you? Yes, in terms of being an inclusive leader. And let me see if I can project this again.
Okay. So Venus, to be clear,
yes,
are these the 7 habits that,
these are the 7 habits.
we were kind of discussing earlier?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. And so if you want to share your online, feel free to tell us, which one. And one of them, I think it's a very important one. It's even in our women community, is disrupting gender bias, is understanding how we as women perpetuate gender bias, how we sometimes are in the way of somebody, also another woman's success, because we become the gatekeeper of their success. And that is, I would say, fundamental to any organization trying to promote women. It's having these conversations and actually training women on gender bias. Don't assume that because we're a woman, we know how we're perpetuating bias.
So I see here you have transparency, support. Sorry, can we switch back to the PowerPoint?
Yes. And I'm going to put it right here so it's easier for you to see.
Okay, so we have disrupt bias, embrace diversity, share power, belonging, recognition, support, and the very last one is transparency. Well, they all look super important to me.
So the way I thought about these was in terms of, we have the DEI, and we sometimes talk only about diversity and inclusion. But when we do that, we fail to talk about equity. And equity is very important because it's the redistribution of resources based on the individual needs. And so disrupting bias and embracing diversity support our goal to be, to have a diverse organization. Sharing power and transparency are more aligned to equity. And belonging, recognition, and support are aligned to inclusion, because inclusion is the tension between us feeling that we belong to a group and that we are recognized and we're valued for who we are and what we bring. And that's what's inclusion about. But we also have to think about equity, because we come into organizations intrinsically thinking about how are the relationships or the interactions we have with people fair? We think about fairness. Was that job, was that promotion fair? Was that assignment fair? We may not talk about it with our, with our boss, but we definitely talk about it with our coworkers, yes? We talk about whether or not we're getting paid fair. So those things are in our mind, and we need to give more visibility to what's really happening in these relationships so we can shift, the outcomes. Because when we don't talk about bias, for instance, in pay, and we pretend that everybody's getting paid equitably, but we don't look into how much Black women, for instance, are getting paid, then we're gonna really fail Black women. We're gonna fail Latino women who normally don't get paid as much as a white man. So we need to disrupt the bias by spotting it and actually finding ways to remove that bias.
These are all very good points. I believe you have more slides that you can share with us. One more that you think that relates to, and the game that you were trying to show us.
So yeah, so the one thing I was trying to do is just really, let me show you this slide, just kind of talk about inclusive leadership. What are some of the traits of an inclusive leader? And I think that you have to think about what leadership is about. It's about influencing, and it's about to influence decisions, individuals, and through communication. Yeah, how do we communicate with others? How do we relate to others? How do we form those relationships? An inclusive leader, it's someone who does focus not on themselves, but focus on the individuals in their group. It's someone who is always thinking, how diverse is my group? Do I have all the talent that I need? Do I have the voices that I need to create inclusive products, for instance? And what are the skills that I need to develop? So one of them, I believe, is growth mindset. Because when you think about a growth mindset, you think about your ability to always learn, to not think that you know it all, that you actually have to learn from others, that you have to deconstruct belief systems that might lead you to be biased. And so growth mindset will be one of the things that you develop as a leader. The other one is humility. And I think that that's something, sometimes they don't get to talk about it in organizations that much, because organizations reward self-promotion. They don't reward humility. And that's the reality. I mean, it would be great if they did require humility, but that's not the case, at least here in corporate America. The other thing that I think we have to think about is the decisions that we're making. Are those decisions biased? Yes, when we are hiring individuals, are we asking them for their previous salary, for instance? We're creating a bias. Are we hiring individuals with a clear criteria of why we're hiring them? Or are we just asking the previous individual in this position to tell us how they did their job and cut and paste those roles and responsibilities to hire someone? That's a great way to add bias into your process. So we had to deconstruct the processes to remove the bias. I think I talk about transparent communication, and then allyship. Allyship, really taking responsibility and ownership as a leader, that you have to support and sponsor the individuals in your team, because they won't, you have to acknowledge that there are these dynamics, these forces, these power dynamics within your organization, that if you're not paying attention to, you're more likely only to promote white men. And I don't think it's wrong to promote white men. Absolutely, it's great. You have the skills, do that. But you also have to think about how maybe you're overlooking, yes, overlooking other individuals that have also the potential and the ability to do the work. So you have to think about it from that broad perspective. And the last one, I think, is also important in this, at least in the Pacific Northwest, where there is a lot of passive aggressive behavior, is conflict management. Being able to manage conflict in a diverse team is important, because a diverse team is going to bring a different set of ideas that could generate some conflict. So how do you manage conflict effectively matters in order for you to create a climate that is much more safe for individuals to participate.
Wow, these are very deep information. Thank you so much, Venus, for sharing this wonderful PowerPoint. And Lynette, I believe you have some more slides you would like to share with everyone here in the audience.
Yes. Let's go ahead. Part of our meaningful conversations has a quote that goes according with our topic. And in this one, we choose a quote from Sandra Pichai. I don't know if I say it fine. And it says, a diverse mix of voices leads to a better discussions, decisions, and outcomes for everyone. So what do you think, Venus?
I think that it does lead to a better outcome when those voices do hold the power to influence the outcomes and the decisions, not just when they are at the table. The other thing we have to think about too, it's not tokenizing individuals. Because if we only say, okay, now let's pick the Black person here or the Latino only to tell us, like we're tokenizing the individual. So we have to think more than that, because we know that if you're the only woman in a male-oriented team, then it's going to be very difficult for you to really exert that power, to have your voice being heard. And that's going to show up in the outcome of the decisions, what happened. It's going to be very uncomfortable try to say, like, this is the way we need to go, when you have 4 men saying, no, this is the other way we need to go. Like, you're really outnumbered. And so you have to think about that. How do you don't necessarily tokenize and create decision-making processes that give weight to the voices in a better way? That is not just, I think we go a lot with the majority. We want to think that we're democratic, that everything is about the majority. But when you only have one voice, one woman in the room, the majority doesn't work.
That's true. That's
No.
so true.
It's not that majority doesn't reflect what everyone needs to.
Yes.
Well, if you want to connect with Venus Rekow, you have many ways where you can connect with her. YouTube, LinkedIn, her company neuralshifts.com, Venus Curious in Instagram, Venus Rekow, Venus.Rekow, and Venus Rekow. So you have many ways where you can connect with Venus, which is a behavioral strategist and diversity and inclusive chief. Also, October is around the corner, and we are in Latinos month, Hispanic month.
All
So
right.
we have movies, Latino Film Festival, and we have Dennis Mencia, Itziar Martinez, and Rene Mena, 3 people who are exceptional in movies in the Latino community, and they will be sharing with us many interesting things. So keep with us and just enjoy it.
All right. Thank you, Lynette. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you, Venus, for your awesome information. And back to meaningful conversations, inclusive leadership in action. We actually have a webinar with Venus done a few months ago, and we have uploaded the webinar on our YouTube. So check our website or Facebook, or even just type NAWMBA Seattle YouTube. You'll be able to find us. So thank you again, everyone, and stay connected and stay safe. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.